Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the March meeting of the Finance and Audit Committee of the Connecticut Paid Leave Authority. Amber, if you would be so kind as to go through the roll call, we'll take attendance.
All right, thank you, Paul. Gerald Dzinski.
Present.
Adrian Cochran has not yet joined us. John Scott has not yet joined us. Mike Soltis.
Present.
Paul Potamianos.
Present.
And Alex Marcelino has not yet joined us, but we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have a quorum. Are there any members of the public that have joined us this morning that require acknowledging? I can't see any. Don't think so.
We can just welcome them.
Thank you very much for joining us, if you are joining us from the public. So our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from the February 25th meeting. Do I have a motion?
A motion. This is Daryl.
Is there a second?
Seconded, Mike.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any comments, edits, revisions? In the absence of any comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Abstentions? I'm abstaining. I was not present at the meeting, so the minutes have been adopted. Next item, to review our budget and our spending to date. David, would you take us through that, please?
Yes, thank you, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see it? Okay, great.
I can.
Oh, there it is.
Here we go.
See, okay, we're on a delay. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about the month of February this morning. So for the month of February, the authority expended $1.2 million. And of that money, $423,000 was spent on post-production support. That was for a couple of months of support. $411,000 for salaries, taxes, and benefits and pension. $304,000 on licenses. The predominant amount of that was for our annual Salesforce license, which is one of the main platforms behind the contribution system and the registration system. $125,000 for our contact center, $69,000 for our outreach efforts, and we actually did get some money back, $135,000 from DOL for the appeals administration system for an amount that they had overcoded to us in January, and then they reversed it in February to correct it. In terms of where we are cumulatively to date, the authority has spent $22.2 million, $9.1 million this month. The categories of what we've spent on remain the same. The significant items that we spent money on remain the same. $8.3 million on the employee contribution system, $5.2 million for salaries, benefits, pensions, and taxes. $2.2 million for post-production support, $2.1 million on the claims and benefits system, $709,000 for outreach efforts, $2.1 million for our support teams, including our contact center. And so those are the significant items that make up the spending of the $22.2 million. We are ahead of budget by $17.5 million cumulatively, and also ahead of budget for the current fiscal year. In terms of bond funds, we updated the schedule to clarify that we have $50 million in bond funds in total authorized. We have $25 million for this fiscal year, and we also had $25 million authorized for the last fiscal year. So that's a total of 50. Still have a little under $12.3 million allocated and available to us. Of that amount so far, we've spent almost $10.5 million, $8.3 million on the employee contribution system, $2.1 million on the benefit system, and just under $100,000 on chatbot. We do have another $600,000 earmarked for future items, for bills that we know are coming. So the total amount that we anticipate spending at this time is almost $11.1 million, with a $1.1 million left available to the authority. In terms of contribution activity, the month of February was a relatively light month in terms of contributions coming in. We got $1.3 million. We did have our first full month of benefit payments that went out, and that was $11.5 million. We also paid our regular administrative fee to AFLAC of 1.9, and normally you will see a seed repayment there. We had coded it to March 1st instead of February 28th. So you'll see 2 payments next month instead of 1 payment this month. The payment isn't late or anything like that. It's up to the authority for how it pays back the seed repayment, as long as it pays the amount back in full by October 22. In terms of contributions, where we are cumulatively through the end of February, we are at $395.3 million. Benefit payments total are, well, including the deposit we made of $20 million, that's 32.8. But actual benefit payments that we've made are $12.8 million through February. Since then, we've actually made another $17.5 million through this month so far. So benefit payments continue to be made to those who need it. And at the end of the month, we have almost $341.5 million in the fund available. We are ahead of budget in terms of contributions as well as benefits, but it's still early in the game for benefit payments. We barely had 2 months of benefit payments, so we are still monitoring that closely as that number does increase as more benefit payments are needed. In terms of where we believe we will be by the end of the fiscal year for our operational budget, our operational budget is $15.1 million of expenses. We believe we'll be at $13.3 million. That's a little better than what we said last time. We believe we'll need less money this fiscal year for post-production support, and also we'll be spending less money on salaries, benefits, taxes, etc. It's taking us a little longer to fill some open IT positions, as those are in high demand right now, and those are a bit challenging to fill. And as far as the contribution budget goes, by the end of the fiscal year, we believe we'll be well ahead of the budget of $11.8 million. We believe we'll be at almost $233 million. By June 30, our projected contributions are at $412 million. That's based on history so far and where we think we'll be through the end of June. And the benefit payments are still based on the actuarial assumptions. As I mentioned, we only have about 2 months of history, so we're not ready to project on that yet until we have some more history under our belts before we can start doing that. That's where we are for February. Does anybody have any questions?
Dave, I have a couple questions.
Yes, Mike.
Just remind me, I'm looking at this screen, right, that you have up now, and we budgeted 11 million for contributions for this
we budgeted the ending balance of the contribution fund to be at $11.8 million. The actual amount of contributions coming in for the fiscal year, we budgeted at 200, well, the net of these two numbers, so it would be $224 million.
Okay.
But we expect to be around the neighborhood of $412 million.
What's that? What is that variance number of $221 million on the bottom?
Oh, right here. Well, this is the difference between where we had budgeted the ending balance of the fund of 11.8 versus where we, now that we have some more information and some more history, where we currently believe the ending balance of the fund will be at June.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just one other questions. Can you, the cost of claims administration, the AFLAC line,
Yes, sir.
can you just explain, is that a straight line every month we pay the same? Or if there's some variables, what are those variables based on?
It is straight line right now. It has been the same amount every month. We budgeted that way, and it's the actual payments are turning out to be that way. There could be some slight fluctuations for the month if there were additional services that they could provide us. As of now, they haven't. So it's pretty much straight line, Mike. I mean, it is straight line now, and it'll probably be more or less straight line in the future.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Mike, those, just to let you know, those additional services aren't ones that they deliver and then charge us. They have to tell us that they plan to engage in those services and get our permission before they engage in those. So there's no surprise built into that.
Okay. Yeah, my question was really, and I think Daryl hinted at this in an email, do our costs vary depending on the amount of staff they have assigned to processing our claims?
No. So when we negotiated the contract, the staffing model remains static. And it's about 160 people that are dedicated just to the Connecticut program. If they have to add additional staff, if they need to bring in special resources that are outside of the contract, those are things that we have to negotiate in good faith. And we are not charged for that unless there's a mutual agreement on its necessity and its cost.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions about our experience to date relative to budget? If not, that brings us to our next agenda item, which is to review the draft budget for the upcoming fiscal year, which I anticipate is going to take the bulk of our time this morning. So David, you want to put those documents on the screen and walk us through them, please?
Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Everyone can see my screen?
We can. Could you put the slides in presentation mode?
No, I will.
please?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to make sure everyone can see it first. You
Yes,
got
sir.
it. Okay, great. That better? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Okay. All right, so we are going to spend some time going over the budget this morning. I did send the reports to everybody. I'm gonna go over it, and we'll spend some time going over it this morning. All right, here we go. As soon as I can get the button to work. All right. So the budget is made up of three parts. One is our operating budget, which summarizes our expenses for the current fiscal year. The bond budget, which will show how much we're budgeting for bond money, which is used for significant IT expenditures for the building of IT systems and the like. And also our contribution budget, which shows the contribution money coming in and the benefit and other expenses going out, which is the main purpose of the paid leave authority. Okay, so let's start with the operating budget. The operating budget, the revenue budgeted is just over $20 million. Most of that is for the authority's administration fee of $20 million. There's also a smaller amount that we've budgeted for some fund recovery penalties for those who haven't paid on time or haven't paid at all. So so since those will be in effect for that fiscal year, we set aside some budget money for that. As far as expenses go, we've budgeted $16.7 million in expenses for the authority. The significant items that make up those expenses are salaries, fringe, and pension expense. That's $8.8 million of the budget. That includes the current staff we have now and budgeted through the end of this fiscal year, as well as 7 additional positions next fiscal year. They are IT positions, and they've been set up so we can move in a direction where we are relying less on outside help for post-production support and moving that more in-house into the authority. Next significant item on the budget for expenditures is contact center. That's $1.5 million. That's the work United Way does for us. That's a fixed fee every month via the contract we have with them. IT support of the contribution system, that's the post-production support. We budgeted $1.9 million for that, for the work for the work they're doing for us. As we anticipate hiring more staff, we expect to rely less on Slalom to do that and rely more on ourselves as time goes on. Our outreach and engagement efforts are budgeted at $1 million. We continue to find a need to keep not only our employers aware of their obligations, but also the employees, the people of Connecticut, so they're aware of the benefits that we have and the questions they have. So we want to just make sure that the state is aware of what we're doing and that these benefits are aware for them. And so we continue our outreach in that regard. The last significant item is grievance adjudication, which is budgeted at $1.2 million. That's with our partners at the DOL, who oversee that process, and they helped us come up with an estimate for that number. So we plug that in to the budget. So the total of all those items makes up $14.4 million, and that's about 86% of the budgeted expenses. The significant assumptions behind the operating budget, some of these we touched on before. As I mentioned, the administrative fee revenue is $20 million. That equates to about a 4.5% of the budgeted contributions in terms of a percent of that number. Also, the fund recovery penalty was, how we budgeted that was as follows. So out of the non-compliance number, which is estimated to be 1% of our contributions, the penalty is 10% of that. And so we also assumed that we would collect 5% of that number. That 5% comes from feedback and experience we've received from recovery agencies who have collected this money historically in the past. This is a conservative estimate, but that's the best information we have for now. So that's what we budgeted. In terms of expenses, the salary line is one of the most significant items in the operating budget. So what we did was based on the most recent information we have from the CBAC agreement, which well, I should say from the CBAC group, which is negotiating with the bargaining units. We've been told so far that there'll be a 2.5% increase for July 1, 2022, and a 3% increase for January 1, 2023. The agreement's not finalized yet, but once it is, and we get that information, we'll certainly go back and evaluate its effect on the budget and adjust if necessary. The benefit rate we budgeted was 90%, 25% for healthcare, and 65% for the pension obligation. That's historically what we budgeted in the past. Our run rate now is around 88%. So there is a slight uptick on that as, excuse me, as the amount we've been told may go up for the fringe benefit rate. Moving on to the bond budget, as I mentioned earlier, we have $50 million of bonds authorized. We spent just about we've allocated about $12.3 million to date and spent about $10.5 million of that. We are budgeting an additional $5.7 million for the following items listed on this page. The statuary reporting is one. We're looking to automate the reporting that's needed for our statutory requirements. We're looking to make some registration adjustments and enhancements, some additional functionality so that we can provide the desired employer experience. Also looking to make some similar enhancements to the private plan as well. Not directly to the private plan since we don't manage them, but just getting the information from them and making it a smooth experience for those who have private plans as they interact with the authority. We're also looking to implement a claims audit tool, and that will help confirm the veracity of the claims in order to minimize potential fraud in the future. Also looking to set aside some money for fund recovery as we work to create a solution to address delinquent contributions, which also includes automated payment reminders, just in case there are some employers out there who need reminding. We're also looking to do some portal replatforming for both the registration and payment aspects. That includes additional language support, some more analyses and reporting, and better functionality, including some additional payment methods. Moving on to the contribution budget. So the contribution budget is made up of the following items. So payroll contributions, we have budgeted at $446 million. That was based on our projection for the current fiscal year. And that projection was based on, in part, on 1 year of actual history. We also added a 7% increase, which was the additional amount that was assumed by the actuaries in their last report. So that's been built in there. The non-compliance number, as I mentioned before, that was budgeted at 1%. And the fund recovery is budgeted at 5%. The fund recovery, there is a 3-month lag for collecting that money from when it's non-compliant. So that's why it's not quite 5% of the non-compliance number, in case you're doing the number in your head. The investment income was $263,000. That was budgeted at 0.1%. That's what we're making now. I will say we are working with OTT to explore other investment options that can give us a better rate, but also give us the flexibility to use the money and invest in low risk items, which of course is what everybody wants, right? They And, you know, we want a high investment and a low risk investment option. So we are exploring that, but we haven't finalized anything yet. So that's why we budgeted at the rate we're making now. Claims and benefit payments were budgeted at almost $449 million. That's based on the latest actuarial assumptions. Again, we don't have enough actual history to budget any other way. So that's what we're using for purposes of this budget. The claims benefit administration amount, $25 million. Like we mentioned before, that is based on the contract that we have with AFLAC and was straight lined over the year. Paid leave authority was $20 million. That's the same amount that was in the operational budget. The seed repayment of $1.3 million, that's budgeted. We're continuing to making the same monthly payments that we're making for the seed repayment through October of 2022. So we'll end at that time. We begin making bond repayments this fiscal year. So for the almost $12.3 million we have outstanding, that money was based on a 3.5% interest rate with a semi-annual interest calculation, and it's paid back once a year. So that was calculated at $1.6 million. So the closing balance of the fund is $198 million. I know that amount is lower than the opening balance of $253 million, but just as a reminder, that is what we expected to happen when we saw the actuarial projections a few months ago. They did note that the balance would decrease in calendar years 2022 and to a lesser extent in 2023 before they leveled off and started increasing again. So this decrease is not unexpected and in line with actuarial estimates. Again, we do budget conservatively based on the latest information we have now. The next page is just a summary of the assumptions. I actually think I walked through most of them already while going over the numbers with you. So I don't think there's anything else here that we need to go over again as we went through them already. That's high level where we are with the budget. So at this point, I'm opening up the floor for any questions or observations anybody has.
David, can I ask you a question back on the operating budget? You have on the revenue side of the operating budget a component related to fund recovery, and I'm wondering why that is. Fund recovery penalties. So to the extent you are able to go after those employers who haven't been contributing. Yes. And you receive those contributions, are you saying that that same percentage of revenue that you're assuming would support the operating budget would also be applied to those fund recovery penalties? I'm just a little confused about how that works.
Yeah, are you asking if they're the same? Why they're the same number?
Right. So you would have an overall, I guess, contribution number against which you applied a percentage to say that this would support the operating budget. So those fund recoveries are on top of that revenue amount, and the same percentage would also be available to support operating costs?
Right. So it turns out, so the penalty that's assessed is 10%. So the cost with outside fund recovery agencies would also be 10%. So that's why they're the same number. And so they're estimated on, so they're calculated off the same contribution number. So that's why they're the same.
All right. So I guess my question may be stated differently, is the amount of revenue against which you initially assumed revenues would flow for to the operating budget is the net after any non-compliance?
Yes. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
So that's why any fund recoveries would add to the revenues. You would get the same percentage that should support operating as opposed to claims.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
Okay. And I have a second question, and then I'm sure others have questions too. On the, actually, it's more of a comment on the bond repayment assumption.
Yes, sir.
Just to note that a final repayment schedule has not yet been established for any bond funds. It would be dependent on the actual amount of bond funding that is allocated to the authority for its use. So, I mean, it's good to build in an assumption of what that is. Actual experience may vary once that repayment schedule is promulgated.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Thanks for the clarification. Okay.
Other questions?
This is Mike. I have a couple questions, observations. On the budget assumptions for the payroll contributions, David, you referenced the actuarial report with a 7% annual increase. Can you refresh my recollection? What was that 7% based on?
The 7% was based on, in part, number one, on wage increases. That was a piece of it. And I'm trying to think what else it was.
Why don't you ask, why don't you let Locke answer the question?
So Mike, built into that assumption is not only inflation, wage increases, but that our FICA wage cap also, that max amount also increases year over year. So when we looked at the 5-year projection, we looked at the trend through all the reports, and that reflected a 7% trend, which we took and applied it towards our budget.
Okay, and the only reason it got my attention is, as we all know, given the labor shortage and given inflation, I've been reading employers are giving significantly higher wage increases compared to in the past, which seems to me, at least on that number, should be favorable to us, right? It result in a greater contribution. So that's the only reason it got my attention.
I'm sorry, it would in the short run, but then what happens is people reach that Social Security cap at a faster rate. So then they're contributing their amount, but you may then see a dip in the latter quarters of the year when they've reached their cap. Sometimes it evens out, sometimes not. So you're right, and you'll also see that fluctuation too because of that.
And just one other question, and I know, David, you said the information about the negotiated labor contract is still a little sketchy. I've been reading about a one-time bonus. The number I saw was $3,500. I'm not sure exactly when it would be paid. Is that on the table for us?
It's a possibility. We're not sure if our staff would be eligible for that bonus or not. Again, we haven't seen the final agreement, so it's all in the details. If it was determined that our staff was eligible for that, we do have a contingency in the salary line, and part of that contingency is in case we do have to pay bonuses that for those staff that in effect are that are retroactive, that represent the retroactive payments that was negotiated as part of that.
Mike, was that the question you were asking, or was it whether or not the bonus is paid by the bonus is paid to eligible staff who contribute to the fund are also subject to contribution? Or did David answer the question?
I think David answered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, you're welcome, Mike. Anybody else? Okay, so we have a couple of options on the table. The committee can look over has the ability to look over the budget for 31 days. That's number one. The next finance committee meeting is in 28 days. So I see Mike laughing already. So we could do one of two. So we could do actually one of three things. We could move the finance committee meeting till it's 31 days. Or number two, we could vote that the review period would be 28 days instead of the 31 and keep the next finance committee meeting. Or we could recommend now to take the budget and present it to the board at the next meeting.
So David, let me clarify that second option. Do we actually have to vote? I thought we had up to 31 days to consider the budget. Were we to consider it at the next finance committee meeting and, approve, reject, whatever, wouldn't that also be compliant with the rules that are in place?
Yes, what I'm saying is we have the 31 days, but the next finance committee meeting is in 28 days. So if we didn't want to move the next finance committee meeting or have a special committee meeting, we could vote now to say, change the time period for this budget from the 31 days to 28 days and just keep the meeting because
Gotcha.
it's 3 days. So,
Right.
I mean, if you feel strongly about the 31, it's not a problem. We'll do it.
I mean,
It's because
You do have
Paul,
to vote
the-
if you want to reduce it to 30, from
You
31
do.
days to something shorter. It
We
requires.
do.
you
Ah.
do
Yes.
because the plan of operation does not have up to language. It is the
Ah.
committee will have 31 days.
you can
So-
put that on your list of potential changes going
We
forward.
will.
But my inclination would be not to take the full 31, but to
Okay.
work it out as part of our regular schedule of meetings. I don't know if the other members of the committee agree with that, but I don't see any need to have a special meeting just to give us 3 extra days.
I
Agreement.
completely concur.
Yeah, I do too. So do we need to make a motion to reduce it to 28 days? I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second,
Second.
Darrell.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor of reducing our review period from 31 to 28 days, indicate by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Abstentions? All right, the motion carries. So we have until the next scheduled Finance and Audit Committee meeting to indicate any changes or approval of the proposed budget.
Right. And of course, if anybody has any questions in that time, please feel free to reach out to me in advance of that, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
And we just have to be careful about not doing a group message, which would constitute a meeting of the committee.
Correct. So I would recommend just emailing me directly and not copying other members of the committee.
No reply also.
Correct.
Did I get that right, Aaron? that's usually your your watchword as we do these.
Thank you
these
for the
communications.
reminder.
Okay. All right. So I think that absent any other comments or questions about the proposed budget for the upcoming year, which I think we'll all take back, review, and send any questions to David for any clarification, we will consider any adoption of that proposal or revisions to that proposal at our next scheduled meeting. And that brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is an update on claims administration. And for that, John Simonetti will talk to us. John?
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. And I will share my screen.
We can see your screen, John.
Okay, thank you. And just trying to get into
Give me one slideshow.
Yeah, that's what I'm just trying to
Sorry.
move around here. Sorry about that, guys.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Just need to. So claims administration update through numbers through 3/21. And this is just a snapshot out of the portal showing the graphical representation of where we are with respect to various categories. And I've got detail on that moving forward here. Okay, so claims filed as of 3/21, total of 26,811. And you can see the monthly totals here, the 5,200 for December, the 9,650 for January, 6,883 for February, and so far through 3/21, we have 5,065 claims. And then the claims by reason, the own illness is by far the largest category of claims, followed by bonding and pregnancy, and then care of a family member as well. The own illness category, of course, was also affected by the number of COVID claims that were filed January and February. And then you can see on the other side here, the smaller categories as well in the other table off to the right for substantially lower numbers of claims. And here are the approved leave types by reason and percentage. So again, you can see the employee own health, own illness is the largest category here, bonding second, pregnancy third, and care of a family member. And then here's some statistics on approvals and numbers of payments. We've had 49,106 payments released as of March 21st to 6,820 unique employees and covering 304,350 total days paid out with a total gross of over $30 million in payments. And then also some other statistics here on the right with respect to the amounts of payments. And I'm just moving my images out of the way here. So benefits paid for leaves of a week or longer, you've got almost 56% at the maximum. And then as it comes down the scale here, a little over 30% between the 500 and 779, and much smaller numbers as you get lower on the pay scale here, almost 11% for the 250 to 499 range, and very small percentage going down to under 250 with an average daily amount of 99. And you can see the payment types. The vast majority of individuals are obtaining their payment via direct deposit, and only about 10% are requesting debit cards at this point. And that is the claims presentation. Any questions?
John, can you just go through how you get the average daily amount of $99.54 how are you getting to that number?
So with the weekly benefit rate that is calculated and the payments that are made on that, they're just dividing the total numbers of payments down by the number of days, giving an average, Daryl.
Okay. So, okay, I got it. So if we were to consider it as a week payment, it would be times 5, times 7?
Typically times 5. That is broken down dependent upon somebody's schedule as well, but it is typically a 5-day week that we're looking at. In some cases, it does vary depending upon that person's particular schedule, but it doesn't affect the average that much.
Okay. Yeah, because when you look at your percentages, 55.8 at 780 or more, et cetera, that's for I imagine a weekly payment, right? And
Correct.
Then you're just dividing by 5 and you're getting, okay.
So some of these are getting skewed down a little bit in that with the intermittent
Oh, sure.
and reduced schedule, although those are much lower percentages, so it's not affecting the average that much.
Okay, all right. Is
Any
there
other-
any value in understanding what the weekly average is?
Well, with respect to the actuarial numbers and the weekly average benefit rate certainly becomes a factor in projecting solvency and expenditures relative to the actuarial projections.
Right, yeah, okay. Thank you. No other question.
You're welcome. Thank you.
John, this is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Can you give us some insight on claims denials?
So on the denials, the current number of denials is, since inception, is 6,440. And while that number is somewhat high, a significant portion of the COVID claims that were filed have wound up being denied because they don't meet the threshold for a serious health condition by statute. I want to say that approximately almost 3,000 of those claims wound up being denied because they do not meet the threshold of serious health condition. And as a result, you're seeing the denial number skewed up significantly higher than what we would have anticipated.
About appeals of denials. What's the status of those?
I think Aaron could probably speak to appeals of denials. I think that's been a relatively low number, but I'm sure that Aaron has the figures on that as well. I know that that even I think that the Department of Labor has also indicated that there's been a very low number of appeals currently. Excuse
It's
me.
actually a very tiny number. We have, just pulling up my tracking sheet, because we got one more appeal yesterday. So we have a total of 25 appeals that have been filed. Of those 25, 17 have been dismissed, either because there was no aggrievement. The individual either, in the no aggrievements, usually it was because the appeals were filed early while we were still in the reconsideration phase. And so the individual actually ended up getting the benefits. There were a handful that were denied on the basis that they were basically misfiled. They filed either a claim for unemployment insurance incorrectly in the CTPL appeal line, or they were appealing like a private short-term disability policy that predated our program. We have 1, 2, 6, 7, 8 claims that we have responded to that we're still waiting for decisions. And to my recollection, actually, all of those related to individuals who were denied on the basis that they had been diagnosed or exposed to COVID, but did not have documentation to substantiate that their condition met the statutory requirement for a serious health condition. In all of those cases, they were not getting any treatment whatsoever from their doctors. Some of them just provided a test. Some of them provided med certs, but the med certs specified that there was no medical treatment. We're actually still waiting for DOL to actually issue decisions on those. Those are all relatively recent, so they haven't hit the queue yet. But for us to have only 25 denials and really only 25 appeals, and only about 20 of them are actual real appeals, our numbers are astoundingly low.
Yeah, I'm baffled, quite frankly, on the number. I've never seen anything like this. Typically, in normal times, at least for unemployment insurance, you're going to get about 20% appeals.
We're hoping
Yes,
that some of this is because we do have that internal reconsideration process, which is what we
exactly.
built. We built an internal reconsideration process so that if there were denials that could be fixed, inappropriate denials, we could fix them quickly. And I think that is turning out to be the mechanism that most people are using. And as I mentioned, there's the handful where they sort of did it simultaneously, and we were able to resolve the issue before the appeal was even heard by the DOL staff. So within the 15 days that we have to respond to an appeal, we're able to say, oh, yeah, they did get an initial denial and we looked into it and it's in the process of reconsideration, and it's been fixed. So I think that internal reconsideration is working as we hoped it would.
So of the 6,440 denials, some of them are under reconsideration. All of them, most of them, it just seems like or are those definitely final with due process and they didn't?
Yeah. So the way we built our system is the denial isn't final until after the reconsideration period ends.
Okay.
So they shouldn't, I'm not entirely sure if the AFLAC number includes sort of those notice of denials or not, but just the reconsideration period is 10 days. I can't remember now. It's either 10 or 15 days. So
15. It's
if there
15.
is a number that is still sort of pending, it's very short, very small number.
So Daryl, you might see a bit of a spike, but the internal review process seems to be working. And John and his team spend a good part of their day with that internal review process and addressing concerns that are raised by constituents, either directly through our contact center or through their legislator, so that they can get an immediate response if they have a concern about their claim that they don't feel is being appropriately or immediately addressed by AFLAC. So I think that's part of what you're seeing, is that their response to claims to concerns about claims that are sent to us, in addition to the internal review process, is really driving down the number of appeals that make their way over to DOL. And that really, as Erin said, that really was the purpose. That's how we designed it, is we really wanted people to be able to get a quick resolution if they had a concern.
And just bearing out from the claims that we've looked at, that is certainly the case where we have seen some reconsiderations being overturned for information that was either subsequently provided or a correction of an error or things of that nature.
Yeah.
And the process is working that way, as well as the de-escalation process for expedited review of claims, as Andrea indicated, with regard to claims that we're asked to look at that are escalated by members of the public or the legislature or what have you. And that process is working as well as we get a timely resolution for those folks.
Yeah, no, I'm confident that the reconsideration, in UI, we call it reopening. It's, that whole process, I'm sure it's very similar. That is working. I guess where I'm confused is, if we have 6,440 denials, are they true denials where they already had the opportunity for reconsideration? Or is it including the ones that could be in the reconsideration 15-day timeline? But nonetheless, even if it's 2,000 or 3,000 final denials, to get 25 appeals is just, it's very, very surprising. I'm baffled, as I said at the opening.
Yeah. We know that AFLAC does tell claimants that they have the right to appeal. They direct them to the DOL website. It's not like we're.
No, yes, yeah, no, I get it. It's just odd.
I can't offer you any more explanation other than I think we can go back to AFLAC and try to see if they can get us the statistics on which of those claims in that pool are in that reconsideration window. I don't know if we can ask them if they have that data.
We can definitely ask. I just over the month to month, the numbers are pretty consistent. So I think that if there are any in the reconsideration window, it's a pretty small proportion. It's not like we have, you know, a large number of decisions
Right.
since March 15th that we're kind of waiting to hear from. I think a lot of it too is if there was a denial for failure to provide documentation, you know, if they end up providing the documentation, we reopen the claim. So that helps with the keeping the appeals down. And there's also just sort of a number of people who I think may have filed for benefits and then like, oh wait, you actually need a doctor's note. Yeah, I can't just say that I'm sick. Oh, okay, well, never mind then. And so,
Right.
you know,
Well, I'm really trying to walk a tight line here on asking questions because I am concerned about the fraudulent activity. I'm just gonna have to state that I wonder if some of these denials where they didn't pursue a reconsideration or appeal or didn't have the proper documentation were attempts by criminals who, you know, filed the claim, was denied, and then went away. And if there is some legitimacy on that, you know, hopefully we're looking at the characteristics of that filing. And Andrea, I don't know if I'm overstepping. I'm struggling with the boundaries. I apologize if
I understand, Daryl. So here's what I can tell you is that AFLAC has a very robust and extremely responsive process for claims that they believe may not be legitimate, and that John and Aaron and I spend a lot of time with the AFLAC team digging into the details of how that process works, patterns that they might see, and the ways in which they are pursuing them. I think that's what I feel comfortable saying in public to not, So I'll also say it this way. AFLAC knows that Aaron and John and I are relentless in our pursuit of the way in which we believe things should be done. And we know that we're spending precious paycheck dollars on, on that fee that we pay them every month. And so we have very high expectations, and they clearly understand it and are responding to those expectations. I think that's what we can say. And I'll ask Aaron and John if they would want to weigh in terms of our relationship with them and the degree to which we hold them accountable for what we expect to have happen with the claimant experience and managing risk in this pool.
Can I jump in and ask a follow-up question along this line? Hopefully this is the appropriate time to ask it. Is there anything you can share with us in this format and forum about those claims that had been flagged as fraudulent or potentially fraudulent? What do we have any update on the outcome?
So there's not a specific update on the outcome because they're still being investigated. What AFLAC has done is it's taken, as they always had, but they've taken this specific opportunity to identify some other potential flags that were sort of outside of ones that we already knew existed. So honestly, one of the reasons that we, after the competitive procurement process went with AFLAC is because they do have this significant body of experience in this space. So they had already identified certain criteria that would flag a fraudulent claim. And then there are some that are specific to this particular type of book of business, and they've identified those as well, and then apply those to the body of the claims to see if there are others that might fit some specific patterns. And they are bringing in resources from other parts of their organization, not charging us more for that. And, in order to identify where there might be some other specific patterns. So they are working very diligently on that. As I said, at least the three of us in particular hold them very accountable to that and do get some regular reports and outcomes as to their progress. So we feel satisfied that they are doing everything that they can to address what occurred and also to engage in preventative measures. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
is this the appropriate update to get, what on the Aflac personnel and United Way, the numbers and what they're doing? Just, I know you indicated Aflac had, I think you said 160 as static. Is there like a breakout, like CSR review, application review, some sort of adjudication review and metrics? Because I don't quite understand.
Yeah.
The
Let me
whole,
see.
the whole, yeah.
The data we have, though, it does include staff names, which we really did not want to share in public.
No, right.
Right. So I apologize because I thought we had taken the opportunity to just give you numbers instead of the actual name. So if I could give that to you immediately following the meeting, I can put that together.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, no
I would say that the majority of the staff are customer care advocates, the people who actually answer the phone. That's the vast majority. We've got about 14 to 16 case managers, right? Those are the ones that are after they come out of what we call the CCA world, they're doing the initial review. They have a team of people that support them. So there's several layers. They're all built in. It is the staffing model that they proposed when we had the competitive bidding process, and the one that we agreed to in the contract.
Great.
So they have absolutely done that. And then they brought in some other resources, as I mentioned, at no cost when we saw the spikes in Omicron.
Right.
In the beginning of the year. So that's the steady number, but I can get you those other numbers, and I apologize for not having them specifically because I know you asked for them. They provided them, but I forgot to de-identify them by person.
And is there metrics that you have approved? In other words, a customer care has to, administer X number of, right? Okay.
Yeah, so those are all in the service level agreements.
Right.
Right, which Aaron and I spent a lot of time negotiating, so a lot of time. So those are all built in. How quickly calls need to be answered, how quickly claims need to be adjudicated, how much time they should be spending on it. All of those things have been negotiated and are part of the contract.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't, John, do you have the call center slide anywhere, or no, that you could pull up really quickly? If not, it's okay. Yeah.
Let me see if I can dig it up. Bear with me for just a moment.
All right. It doesn't include all of the SLAs, but at least gives a sense of what some of them are.
Stop sharing for a moment while I switch over, if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
And just for the committee, I mean, this helps us understand how the money is being spent for the operations.
Yes, understood.
Okay, so we've got a couple of slides here. And let me just bring those up and see if I can go through it. Let's see. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, so this one, Daryl, I think, thank you, John. This is the exact one that I wanted. So you can see where, where it has all of the calls, and the SLA is to be able to answer about 85% of the calls within 30 seconds. And so you can see the green line at the bottom, the legend said SLA for service level. That's what that is. So every week they give us these statistics, and we can say, okay, well, you're at it, or you're above it, or you're below it, depending on what the volume is. So that's one of the ways in which we measure it. The other one was, how long the calls actually are. and the handle time and the hold time, and they measure those as well. So you can see that on the right side of the screen. So those are actually two of a lot of the SLAs that have been negotiated so that we can understand how they're actually delivering the service and if it's in compliance with what we agreed to would be the appropriate service levels for what they're doing. If that's just an example. Okay. And I'll get you the numbers. I apologize for that. So we can break that out.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank
I
you.
think that brings us to any items of old business. Items of old business anyone would like to raise? Items of new business? Right, hearing none, I think at this point we are prepared to move into executive session. You should all have received, members of the committee should have received a link to access that executive session. So we will be exiting our normal meeting, going to executive session, and we will come back to regular session before adjournment. So do we need to vote to move to executive session? And we would
So-
move to executive session for the purpose of discussing the responses to a request for proposal pursuant to various sections of the general statutes, 1-200 6E, 1-210B24, and 1-225F. And such a vote to move to executive session requires an affirmative vote of 2/3 of those of us who are present at the meeting today. So is there?
And
Before
inviting
you
the
ask
staff.
for the motion, can you include
It's
us?
invite the staff, yeah.
Yes,
Motion
and the motion, hang on,
Mhm.
so the motion would be to move to executive session, and we want to invite members of the staff to join us in that executive session to consider this matter. And the members of the staff we're inviting are Andrea, Aaron, David, and Locke, I believe. Did I miss anybody?
No.
Okay. Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of moving to executive session, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Abstentions? All right, we have the 2/3 of the members who have voted to move to executive session. So at this point, if you would, members, you can leave this session. We will access the link to join the executive session. We will come back to this regular meeting after we've concluded executive session. And I'll see you in executive session. Thank you.
Great. And Amber, you'll keep this live and continue recording until we come back. Thank you. Perfect.
I think that's everyone.
I'm just going to note for the record that it is 10:27.
Okay, we're good.
All right, thank you. Do we have everybody back? Ah, there's John.
Took me a minute to find the link again.
Yes. All right, I think we have everybody back from our executive session where we received an update on responses to the RFP for actuarial services. And so we've concluded our executive session portion of the agenda, which brings us to our last item of today's meeting, which is adjournment.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you all. See you next month.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.